The coffee hit first. Hot, dark, spreading across the most expensive desk in Chicago like a slow death sentence. Every person in that penthouse office stopped breathing. Darius Kane, 32 years old, tattooed throat, eyes like frozen concrete, looked down at his soaked shirt. Then slowly, very slowly, he looked up. The new secretary was shaking so hard the empty mug rattled against his fingers. Nobody moved. The bodyguard near the east wall, a giant named Booker, had already taken one step forward, hand near his jacket, jaw tight, because he had seen what happened the last time someone disrespected this office. It wasn't pretty. The new secretary's name was Salem, 24. Slim frame hidden beneath a worn trench coat that had seen better years. Dark circles carved beneath his eyes like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. And right now, standing in front of the most feared alpha in the Midwest, he looked like he was calculating exactly how bad this was going to get. Pretty bad. That was the honest answer. 3 secretaries had quit this month alone. One left a handwritten resignation letter on the front desk at 7 in the morning. Didn't even wait for the elevator. Just took the stairs and never came back. The one before him reportedly broke down crying in the parking garage after a single phone call from Darius's direct line. And now this one had spilled coffee directly onto the man himself. Salem opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Clean it up. 2 words. Flat. No volume. No heat. That was somehow worse than yelling. Salem grabbed the nearest cloth and moved fast, dabbing at the desk's edge, hands trembling visibly. The city glittered 40 stories below through floor-to-ceiling glass. Rain streaked down the windows in long diagonal lines. Chicago at night looked like spilled ink from up here. Darius watched him work. Not with anger, not with irritation, with something closer to attention. Hi viewers, here's what I need to know right now. If you walked into your very first day at a new job and accidentally spilled something on your terrifying new boss, would you stay or would you walk straight out that door? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Salem Vale stayed, and that alone made him different from everyone else. Darius stood, unbuttoned his ruined shirt without a word, and disappeared behind a private door. Booker remained at his post, arms crossed, studying the new secretary with something unreadable in his expression. Salem finished wiping the desk, set the cloth down, straightened his coat. He pressed one hand flat against his stomach. Just for a second. Protective. Instinctive. Booker clocked it immediately. The new secretary didn't notice. He moved back to his station outside the office door, sat down carefully, and pulled up the scheduling software like nothing happened. Like his hands weren't still shaking. Like the nausea climbing his throat wasn't about to win. He swallowed hard, reached into his coat pocket for a plain cracker, ate it quietly. 3 minutes later, Darius returned in a fresh black shirt, buttoned to the collar, and walked past Salem's desk without looking at him. He paused at the elevator, didn't turn around. Booker, sir. Nobody touches him. The elevator doors closed. Salem stared at his screen. He had no idea what that meant. But Booker was already on his radio, and something in the air of that entire floor shifted like a temperature drop before a storm. The trash can saved him. Salem made it to the executive bathroom at 7:43 in the morning and barely got the door locked before his body gave up the fight entirely. Both hands gripping the sink afterward. Forehead pressed to the cold mirror. Breathe. Just breathe. He was 7 weeks along. The nausea had started at week 5 and hadn't stopped since. He had learned to time it, roughly 90 minutes after waking, sometimes triggered by strong smells, sometimes arriving for absolutely no reason at all like a punishment. The Kane building smelled like polished wood and expensive coffee. That second one was a problem. He splashed cold water on his face and studied the reflection. Hollow cheeks, bruised-looking skin beneath both eyes, a faint yellowing mark at the left side of his jaw that makeup almost covered completely. He pulled his collar up. Old habit. Back at his desk, the morning schedule was already packed. 13 calls. 4 in-person meetings. 2 documents requiring cross-referencing with external legal teams. Salem worked through them quietly and precisely, because precision was the only thing keeping this situation stable. He needed this job. Not wanted. Needed. Somewhere in this city, a man named Roderick Vane was still looking. Still angry. Still convinced that what Salem was carrying belonged to him, and therefore so did Salem. The Kane Syndicate building was the last address anyone would connect to him. That was the only reason he applied. That logic held until 11:15, when a knock came at his desk from an unfamiliar face. A woman from building services carrying a small tray. On it, a ceramic cup, steam rising gently. A folded card tucked beneath it. Salem stared. "From the executive floor," she said simply. Then walked away. He unfolded the card. No signature. No letterhead. Just a single printed line listing the tea blend, the brewing temperature, and a note at the bottom. Caffeine-free. Ginger base. Recommended during first trimester. The cup slipped in his fingers. He caught it. Barely. His doctor had recommended this exact blend 4 days ago. In a private appointment. Under a different name. In a clinic on the opposite side of the city. Nobody here knew he was pregnant. He had told no one. Which meant someone had investigated him well enough to access medical recommendations from a clinic visit made under a false name. Salem set the cup down very carefully and looked up at the security camera in the corner of the hall. It was already angled away. That night, when he left the building and walked toward the transit stop 3 blocks east, he noticed it. Subtle at first. A dark SUV maintaining perfect distance. Same speed. Same turns. Not threatening. Protective. He stopped at the corner of Michigan and Erie and watched it idle. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message. Just a photo. Him. Taken from behind. Walking out of the building exit 20 minutes ago. His blood went cold. It wasn't from the SUV. Someone else entirely had been watching. He fell asleep at his desk at 9:17 p.m. It wasn't planned. Salem had been cross-referencing 2 shipping manifests against a flagged port audit, and somewhere between pages 41 and 42 of the secondary document, the words stopped making sense and his head dropped forward onto his folded arms. He was out before he could stop himself. The building had mostly emptied by then. Cleaning crew on the lower floors. Security rotation running its standard route. The penthouse floor was quiet in a way that felt different from silence. Heavier, like the whole building was holding something back. He didn't hear the elevator. Didn't hear the footsteps. He woke up because of the weight. Specifically, the weight of something warm and dark settling across his shoulders. He lifted his head slowly, disoriented, blinked once, twice, and registered the coat. Black, wool, smelled like cedar and something colder underneath. Darius's coat. He was already halfway across the room, back turned, reviewing documents at the standing glass table near the window. Salem didn't move, didn't speak. He wasn't sure what the protocol was for this exact situation. The manual, which had been 4 pages long and almost insultingly vague, had not covered this. What it did cover: never interrupt Mr. Kane mid-review. Never ask personal questions. Confirm all verbal instructions via written follow-up within the hour. Never comment on anything related to the syndicate's logistics contracts without prior clearance. It said nothing about what to do when the man left his coat on you. Salem pulled it slightly tighter anyway. He was exhausted in a way that went past physical. The kind of tired that had been stacking for weeks. Running, hiding, lying low, managing a pregnancy alone with no support and no safety net and a constant low-grade fear that hummed underneath every single moment. Across the room, Darius set down his pen. Didn't turn around. You've been here since 7 a.m. It wasn't a question. The port audit had discrepancies, Salem said carefully. I wanted to flag them before morning. Pause. They've been there for 3 years, Darius said. They'll survive until 8 a.m. Another pause. Longer this time. Go home, Salem. First time he'd used his name. Salem stood slowly, shrugged the coat from his shoulders, and walked to hang it on the stand near the office door. He reached for his bag, turned. Darius was looking at the ultrasound photo. It had slipped from Salem's folder when he fell asleep. Small, grainy, black and white, sitting at the edge of the desk in plain sight. For one full second, the Mafia boss of Chicago's most feared underground network stared at a prenatal ultrasound photograph with an expression that had no business belonging to his face. It looked almost like grief. Then it was gone. Good night, Darius said. Flat. Final. Salem picked up the photo, tucked it away, walked to the elevator without looking back, and didn't see the way Darius turned the moment the doors closed, and stood very still in front of the window for a long time, looking out at the city like it owed him something it had already taken once before. The next morning, Salem's entire workstation had been reorganized. Ergonomic chair replaced. Footrest added. A small discreet bin placed within easy reach. Nobody said a word about it. Then Darius walked past his desk, paused, and without breaking stride. Who hurt you? The text arrived at 6:02 a.m. No contact name, no greeting, just a photo. Salem, outside the prenatal clinic 2 blocks from the transit hub, taken from across the street with a long lens, clear enough to read the clinic's name above the door. Beneath it, one line, found you. Salem sat on the edge of his bed for 4 minutes without moving. Then he deleted the message, got dressed, and went to work, because what else was there? His name was Roderick Vane, and he was 41 years old and currently running the most successful gubernatorial campaign in Illinois in 2 decades. Billboards, interviews, carefully controlled press cycles, a polished narrative about community and family and accountability that played beautifully to every demographic his team had targeted. He was also, quietly, methodically, and without anything close to remorse, hunting the person carrying his child. Not out of love, out of control. Salem had spent 8 months inside that world, long enough to understand how it worked, how someone like Roderick operated at 2 speeds simultaneously. The version the cameras got, composed, charming, commanding. The version that appeared at 3 in the morning in a locked room. Something colder and much more precise. When he discovered the pregnancy, Roderick's first call wasn't to Salem. It was to his campaign manager. The termination was framed as a scheduling issue. Medical appointments arranged without Salem's knowledge. A car that would arrive Thursday morning. Private facility. A signed confidentiality agreement that had somehow already been prepared. Salem found the document on Roderick's desk by accident. He left that same night with nothing but his coat and his cracked phone and the specific kind of fear that makes your legs move before your brain finishes processing the decision. Now, sitting at his desk on the 41st floor of the Kane building, he stared at the scheduling software and tried to organize his breathing. His phone buzzed again. This one was different. A screenshot, his name, his photo, and the words pregnant Omega splashed across a private gossip forum frequented by Chicago's elite underground circles. Attached, a blurry image from inside a prenatal waiting room. Someone had tipped off Roderick's people about the clinic, which meant the clinic had been compromised, which meant the false name hadn't held. Salem closed the screen, pressed both hands flat against the desk. Don't react. Don't let it show. He didn't notice Darius until the shadow fell across his desk. The Alpha stood there, reading nothing, looking directly at Salem, holding a single printed sheet. His expression was exactly what it always was. Unreadable, controlled, like a wall that had never once considered falling. He set the paper face down on the desk, said nothing, walked back to his office. Salem flipped it over. It was a threat assessment report. His name at the top. Roderick Vane's name further down, highlighted in red. And beneath it, a security update logged 40 minutes ago. 2 unfamiliar vehicles surveilling building perimeter. East side. Plates traced to private contractors, Vane campaign associated. Darius had known before Salem even arrived. The Alpha's office door was open, just barely. Through the gap, Salem watched Darius pick up his phone, speak 2 sentences, set it down. That was all. But within 20 minutes, the 2 vehicles on the east side were gone. Completely. And Salem felt something he hadn't allowed himself in months. Something cautious and terrifying and completely against his better judgment. He felt almost safe. Then Booker appeared in the hallway with the specific expression he wore when something bad was being managed quietly. He met Salem's eyes. Shook his head once. Not yet. The voices hit the moment the elevator opened. Loud. Aggressive. The kind of posturing that came from men who were used to every room adjusting itself around them. Salem stepped out carrying a document folder and walked directly into a wall of tension he had absolutely no warning about. The penthouse conference room was full. 6 men Salem didn't recognize sat arranged around the long table. Each one had the particular stillness of someone who handled violence professionally and wasn't especially bothered by it. Their suits were expensive. Their expressions were not friendly. Darius sat at the head, hands flat on the table, perfectly still. Booker stood at the far wall like architecture. Salem should have backed into the elevator immediately. He almost did. Then the folder slipped. Papers scattered across the entry floor in a wide arc and the sound cut through the room like a dropped glass. Every head turned. Every pair of eyes landed on him at once. And the air changed the way air does right before something bad becomes something worse. One of the men smiled. He was wide-shouldered, rings on 2 fingers, the kind of confidence that had been professionally maintained for years. A pregnant Omega? The man leaned back in his chair. Scanned Salem top to bottom like he was assessing something for resale. Kane, you gone soft on us? Nobody laughed. The room didn't breathe. Darius's eyes moved from the man to Salem. Just once. Something passed through them. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Calculation. Then he looked back at the man who had spoken. And when he did, the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees immediately. Not metaphorically. The kind of cold that made the back of your neck tighten and your instincts start filing exit routes. Darius stood. Slowly. The way something large moves when it isn't rushed because it doesn't need to be. He adjusted the cuff of his left sleeve. Then his right. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Watch your tone. 3 words. Quiet enough that the man had to process them twice. The smile disappeared. Everyone at that table had money. Most of them had power. But every single one of them recognized the specific register Darius was speaking in, and they all understood that what came after that tone was never something you wanted to be in the room for. Salem was still frozen near the scattered papers. Darius didn't look at him when he spoke next. He stays. Not he can go. Not someone escort him out. He stays. The man with the rings said nothing. Looked at the table. Made the correct decision. Salem crouched and began gathering papers with hands that were not entirely steady. Booker materialized beside him, not making a scene of it, just present, and helped collect the last few sheets without comment. The meeting resumed like the previous 60 seconds had been edited out of existence. But as Salem stood to leave, Darius finally looked at him. Direct, steady. A look that lasted 2 full seconds and carried inside it something Salem could not name. Not protection exactly, not warmth, not possession. Something that sat in the space between all three and refused to be categorized. He went back to his desk, set the folder down, sat very still for a moment, because that look meant something. He just didn't know yet whether it was something that would save him, or something that would make everything infinitely more complicated. His phone buzzed. Photo. Him. Entering the Kane building this morning. This one had a caption. He can't protect you from me. The drawer wasn't locked. That was the first wrong thing. Salem had been sent to retrieve a secondary copy of the East Coast Port Audit. Darius's exact words, exact filing location, third drawer on the left side of the private office cabinet. He found the audit. He also found what was sitting directly beneath it, a manila folder, thick, worn at the edges like it had been opened hundreds of times. His name was on the tab, not Salem Vale. His real name, the one he stopped using 4 months ago. He stood there for 3 full seconds before he opened it. He wished he hadn't. Inside, photographs, surveillance logs, printed records going back 14 months. Roderick Vane's financial connections to 3 shell companies Salem had never heard of. Medical facility contracts. A timeline of Salem's movements starting from the night he left Roderick's townhouse. Every transit stop, every hostel, every false name, every clinic visit, mapped out in precise chronological order. All of it. Every step he thought was invisible. Documented. At the very back, a single handwritten note clipped to a photograph of the Kane building's front entrance. The date on the note was 3 days before Salem applied for the position. 3 days. He set the folder down on the desk, picked it back up, set it down again. His hands were doing that thing where they moved without his permission because his brain had stopped processing normally. The audit was still in his other hand. He was gripping it hard enough to crease the cover page. Darius hadn't hired him because he needed a secretary. He'd been placed here, watched, studied, managed, like a variable in someone else's equation. And the worst part, the part that turned everything Salem thought he understood completely inside out, was that somewhere in the past weeks he had started to feel something close to trust. That was the real wound. Not the surveillance. Not the investigation. The trust. He put the folder back exactly how he found it. Walked to the door. Paused. Turned around once more and looked at the entire office. The clean desk, the city view, the small details he had started to read like a language. The coat on the stand. The caffeine-free tea. The reorganized workstation. All calculated. All deliberate. Everything. He picked up his bag from his desk. Didn't log out of the system. Didn't leave a note. He walked to the elevator, pressed the lobby button, and watched the floor numbers drop. By the time the doors opened onto the street, the rain had started again. He walked into it without stopping. Behind him, 40 stories up, the security feed registered his exit at 7:44 p.m. Booker checked the timestamp, picked up his radio, said 2 words. He's gone. By Thursday morning, 2 warehouses on the Southport were on fire. Nobody claimed it. Nobody needed to. The men who worked Chicago's underground freight routes understood exactly whose frustration was burning, and they cleared out of Darius Kane's operational radius without being asked twice. Inside the Kane building, the atmosphere had shifted into something nobody had a clean word for. Meetings got canceled without explanation. 3 external contractors lost their access codes overnight. The syndicate's senior lieutenants, Booker, a sharp-eyed strategist named Terrence Okafor, and a logistics operator called Marcus Webb, moved through the building like men walking around something they weren't allowed to name out loud. Darius had not slept. That much was visible. He was still in his office at 4 in the morning 2 nights running. Not reviewing documents. Not on calls. Just standing at the window with a glass of water he never touched, watching the city like he was waiting for it to give him something back. Terrence finally said it on day 3. "You need to tell us what we're looking for." Darius didn't answer immediately. "Someone who doesn't want to be found," he said finally. Terrence looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the floor. Because this was new. In 11 years working under Darius Kane, neither of them had ever seen the man search for a person he couldn't just have located within 48 hours. The resources existed. The network existed. Salem was simply choosing not to be found. And Darius was choosing to respect that, which was somehow the most alarming development of the entire situation. Meanwhile, across the city, Salem had been awake for 31 straight hours. He was in a budget motel off the I-90 interchange, sitting on the edge of a narrow bed with his coat still on, cracker wrappers beside him and his phone face down on the mattress. The nausea had been bad that morning. The fear was worse. He kept returning to the same thought, circling it from every angle. Darius had known from the beginning, but he hadn't handed him back to Roderick. He'd removed Roderick's contractors from the building perimeter, replaced the security routes, arranged medical-grade tea from a private clinic recommendation, put his own coat on him when he fell asleep at his desk. None of that was surveillance strategy. Salem pressed both hands over his stomach. The baby moved, just slightly, first time. He sat very still and felt it. That small, undeniable, completely real thing, and something cracked open in his chest that he had been keeping sealed for months. Then his phone screen lit up. Not a text. A news alert. Roderick Vane at a press conference downtown, announcing an expanded family values platform and calling for stronger protections for Alpha-Omega family structures. He was smiling. Cameras loved him. The crowd applauded. And in the lower right corner of the broadcast frame, just barely visible, a man in a gray jacket holding a photograph. Salem zoomed in. His own face, printed, in Roderick's campaign aide's hand. He grabbed his coat, his bag. The motel door was already open before he finished processing the decision. He had one contact left in this city who wasn't compromised. One. And it terrified him that the number he was about to call belonged to the man he had just run from. The ballroom was the wrong place for all of this. Salem understood that the moment he walked in. The charity gala, a hospital fundraiser packed with politicians, CEOs, and the specific brand of wealthy that paid for tables just to be seen sitting at them, was the last location he would have chosen to be standing in a borrowed suit with his phone battery at 9% and Roderick Vane 20 feet away pretending not to see him. He had come to retrieve documents. Specifically, a signed affidavit from a former Vane campaign employee who was prepared to go on record about the private medical arrangements. The contact was supposed to meet him here. Neutral ground. Public location. Safe. Except the contact was 20 minutes late, and Roderick had already started moving. He did it the way he always did things in public, smoothly, incrementally, with perfect plausible deniability. A word to a nearby aide. A slow arc through the room that appeared entirely coincidental. Then suddenly he was there, right beside Salem near the East Bar, and he was smiling for the room while his voice dropped to something only Salem could hear. "You look tired." A pause. "That's what running does." Salem didn't move, didn't look at him directly. "You made this harder than it needed to be," Roderick continued. His hand came to rest lightly on the bar beside Salem's arm. Nowhere near touching, just close enough. "Come back, quietly, and I make the rest of this go away." "You mean the baby?" Roderick's smile didn't change. "I mean all of it." Cameras were everywhere. Journalists, phones, an event photographer circling the room on a predictable pattern. This was the safest and most dangerous place Salem had ever stood simultaneously. He turned to face Roderick directly. "Then I guess we stay here." Roderick's expression shifted. "Just the edges. Just enough." "You really think?" The ballroom doors opened. Not dramatically, not loudly, just opened. And the entire room reoriented. Darius Kane walked in alone. No security visible. No entourage. Just the man himself in a black suit, moving through a crowd of Chicago's most powerful people the way water moves around stone. Without adjustment, without effort, without acknowledging any of the attention tracking him from every corner of the room. He didn't scan the space. He walked directly to Salem. No hesitation. No searching. Direct. Like he already knew exactly where he was. He stopped beside him, his shoulder 4 inches from Salem's. And then, in front of every camera, every journalist, every rival and politician and power player in that room, Darius Kane placed one hand, deliberate, unmistakable, impossible to misread, over Salem's stomach. The room went completely still. Roderick didn't move. Darius looked at the cameras. Not Roderick. Not the crowd. The cameras. "At least now," he said. Quiet enough that only the nearest people heard it and loud enough that the nearest people would make sure everyone else did. "Everyone knows who you'll answer to, if either of them are touched." Roderick Vane stood in the middle of the most photographed room in Chicago that night, and said nothing, because there was nothing safe left to say. Salem felt the hand against him. Steady, certain, grounded. And for one unguarded second he forgot every complicated thing attached to this moment. He just breathed. Then his eyes moved past Darius's shoulder, and he saw him, a man near the back wall, gray jacket, face half-turned, holding a phone angled not at Roderick, at Darius. And he wasn't photographing the moment. He was photographing the exits. The media didn't wait until morning. By 11 p.m., the story was already fragmenting across every platform. Photos, speculation, headlines stacked on top of each other like a building going up in fast motion. Kane syndicate boss makes public move at charity gala. Mafia king claims pregnant Omega. Who is he? Some outlets played it as scandal. Some played it as power. One tabloid went with love in the underground, which was almost funny. None of them got it right. In the private car heading away from the gala, Salem sat with his hands in his lap and the city moving past the window in blurred streaks of light, and he did not say anything for 6 blocks. Then, "You knew who I was before I applied." Not a question. Darius, across from him, didn't deny it. "Yes. You built a case on Roderick before I ever walked through your door." "Also yes." Salem turned from the window. "So what was I to you? A witness? Evidence? Something to keep safe until you needed to use it?" The question sat between them. Darius looked at it for a moment. Then he did something Salem had never seen him do in 6 weeks of daily proximity. He looked uncertain, just for a second, just around the edges of his expression. A slight tension at the jaw, a shift in how he held his shoulders. Gone almost immediately, but it was there. In the beginning, Darius said slowly. Yes, that was the intent. Salem felt it land. Let it. And then, long pause. And then you ate crackers at your desk at 7 in the morning because you were too stubborn to admit you were sick. And you stayed until 9 p.m. to flag a 3-year-old discrepancy that had nothing to do with your job description. Another pause. Quieter. And you flinched every time your phone rang from an unknown number. And you still showed up. He stopped. Seemed to weigh something. Every day you showed up. And I couldn't. He stopped again. This was a man who had not stumbled over words in his adult life. I couldn't stop watching for you to leave. The car slowed at a light. Salem pressed his lips together. Looked at the ceiling. Because the thing that was happening in his chest right now was completely inappropriate for the circumstances, and he was acutely aware of that, and it was happening anyway. The files, he said. Finding me. All of it. I still don't know if I can. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Quiet. Final. No pressure behind it. Just the fact of it. Salem exhaled. Outside, Chicago slid past. 24 hours ago, he was in a motel room with a 9% phone battery and nowhere left to go. Now he was here, and the man across from him had stood in front of every camera in the city and said something that couldn't be unsaid and couldn't be taken back. That was terrifying. That was also the first real thing anyone had done for him. In a very long time. I'm not forgiving you yet, Salem said. I know. I'm also not leaving. Darius looked at him then. Fully. The way he had in the conference room. That look that refused to be categorized. That sat in the space between things and held its shape. Good, he said. Back at the building, Booker met them at the private entrance. His expression was wrong. Not urgent. Controlled. The specific kind of controlled that meant he had information he was managing carefully. We have a problem, he said. Darius looked at him. The penthouse security system was accessed from inside the building. 22 minutes ago. Booker's jaw tightened. Someone photographed the access codes. Darius went very still. Who has penthouse clearance? 14 people. Pause. 13 that I can confirm right now. The number settled. 1 unaccounted for. Someone already inside. The nursery started as a storage room. That was important. That was the detail Salem kept returning to. That nobody announced it, nobody asked, nobody made a project of it with fanfare or declaration. 1 week it was full of archived shipping documents and a broken desk chair. The next week the documents were gone. The week after that, Booker arrived with 2 men carrying flat-packed furniture and said only, Darius said pick a color. Salem stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he said green. The room was green by Thursday. The building had changed in ways that were hard to explain to anyone who hadn't watched it happen slowly. Marcus Webb, the logistics operator who communicated almost exclusively through spreadsheets and one-word responses, had started leaving fruit on Salem's desk on Monday mornings. Not every Monday. Just when he remembered. Apples mostly. Once a very serious mango that he placed exactly in the center of the desk like a formal offering and then walked away without comment. Terence Okafor had asked, just once, unprompted, whether the prenatal appointments needed driver coordination. Salem said yes. Terence nodded, and it was never discussed again, but a car was always there. Booker had started standing slightly closer in hallways. Not crowding, just present. Like a wall that had quietly decided to relocate. None of them said anything sentimental about it. None of them had to. Darius was learning slowness. That was the only way to describe it. The man who moved through every room like a decision already made was learning how to sit beside someone without requiring anything from the moment. He brought tea. He stopped scheduling calls after 7 p.m. He came into the nursery once and stood looking at the half-assembled crib with an expression Salem was starting to recognize. The one that appeared when Darius was feeling something he didn't have a container for yet. "You don't have to stand there silently," Salem said. "You can just help." Darius picked up the instruction sheet, looked at it for a moment. "This is deliberately confusing. It's a crib, not a shipping manifest." "I stand by what I said." Took them 40 minutes. It should have taken 15. Darius refused to consult the diagram after the third step, and Salem refused to point out that he was wrong until the fourth step proved it. And somewhere in the middle of the argument about which bolt went where, something small and ordinary and completely irreversible happened. Salem laughed. Real. Unguarded. The kind that surprised him coming out. Darius stopped what he was doing and looked at him, like he was memorizing something. The traitor's name turned out to be Silas Drummond. 12 years with the syndicate, trusted with penthouse clearance, internal security rotations, and private scheduling. He had been feeding information to a rival network for 7 months. Not Roderick. Someone else entirely. Someone who had been watching Darius's operation for years and identified, correctly, that the only real opening was through whoever Darius decided to care about. They found Silas 3 days after the gala. The details were not shared with Salem. He didn't ask. What he did was sit in the nursery that evening with the crib fully assembled and the green walls catching the last of the evening light through the new curtains. Soft, pale yellow, which he had chosen because they made the green look warmer, and he let himself feel the weight of where he was. Safe. Not permanently. Not without condition. Not in any simple or uncomplicated way. But right now, in this room, with this city outside and this building around him and these specific people who had quietly, without announcement, arranged themselves into something that looked remarkably like what family was supposed to mean. He placed both hands on his stomach. The baby moved. More clearly now. More certain. Like something that had decided to take up space and wasn't apologizing for it. Darius appeared in the doorway. Leaned against the frame. Arms crossed. Looking at the room like the room had done something right. "Booker is requesting a dedicated protection rotation for the hospital visit next week," he said. "How many people?" He said 4. I said 6. "That's too many. We compromised at 5. Salem shook his head. Darius almost smiled. Not quite, but close enough that the difference barely mattered. "I never expected a fortress to feel like this," Salem said quietly. More to himself than anything. Darius was quiet for a moment. "Neither did I." Outside, Chicago moved the way it always did, loud, cold, layered with things that didn't advertise themselves. The vain campaign had gone silent after the gala. Legal proceedings were moving through channels that Terrence managed with the specific precision of someone who enjoyed watching powerful men become significantly less powerful. Roderick's advisors had reportedly advised retreat. It wouldn't hold forever. Nothing ever did. But tonight the nursery was green. The crib was assembled, slightly imperfectly, one side rail a 1/4 inch lower than the other, which Salem had decided to leave because it was theirs and it was real. The tea was warm. The building was locked. And downstairs, Marcus Webb was updating the security log with 5 confirmed names for next week's hospital rotation. 5 men who would, without question, without complaint, and without needing to be asked twice, be exactly where they needed to be. And that is where we leave them. Not with everything solved. Not with every threat gone. But with something that took longer to build than any of them expected and turned out to be worth every complicated, difficult, imperfect step it required. If the story moved you, if you've ever had to trust someone when trust felt like the most dangerous thing available, drop a comment below. Share what part hit you hardest. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit that button and turn on notifications. Every story on this channel is built for people who need to know that hard beginnings don't decide endings. You don't want to miss what comes next.